one priority. Instead of reporting on current day events like we usually do here at Soda Pop News, today we're going to focus on some special interviews, discussions, and more. We'll have our live, in-station reporting with Bush come up first. Take it away, Fanta.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fanta, and as a response to what everyone has been asking for, Bush and I are finally, after 10 years since the events, are going to have a conversation and clear some questions on why the U.S. got involved in the war with Iraq. So to get us started, I'll start by saying the U.S. and coalition forces, primarily the United Kingdom, initiated war in Iraq. Many explosions had rocked Baghdad's capital, while many people were wondering what the U.S. was scheming at the time. Now, President Bush.
Well, before I say anything, I'd like to say good morning to you, Fanta, and to everyone else watching, as well as to what you just mentioned. At the time, America and coalition forces were in the early stages of the military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
So, you and your advisors had built much of your case for war on the idea that Iraq was under the dictator Saddam Hussein, who had close ties to Al-Qaeda, and it was in the process of building weapons of mass destruction.
Correct, and so because of this, the U.S. was forced to attack Iraq with very little support from the world community.
Alright, so that clears up the questions people had for why the U.S. got involved in the war on Iraq. Thank you for your time, Bush.
No, thank you for the time you've given me to clear up the questions for the citizens of the United States.
No problem, Bush. Back to you.
Now that's been cleared, we're gonna have Sprite tell us about the horrors of the war in Iraq.
Hello everyone, I'm out here in the Iraqi desert next to a minefield, and a very sad tragedy has occurred recently, and that is that the rebel troops have been using children as minesweepers. Very tragic. Along with this, they've also been using gas. That's why I must have this gas now. And with the gas, they've been using mustard gas, which is a mix of pneumonia and bleach. And so, sadly, they have invaded Cuba, which has now caused the Americans to get involved into a war called the Gulf War.
Thank you for your time, Sprite. Time for our interview of the day, right after we hit these advertisements.
To buy the world a home and furnish it with love. Grow apple trees and honey bees and snow white turtle doves. I like to teach the world to sing. Sing with me. Perfect harmony. Perfect harmony. I like to buy the world a home and keep it company. That's the real thing. I like to teach the world to sing. To perfect harmony and I'd like to buy the world a coat and keep it company. It's the real thing. Give it what the world wants today. It's the real thing. Give it what the world wants today. It's the real thing.
You know, most American families are able to learn a lot through books, but sadly a lot of African communities don't have that opportunity. So go over to your local library and donate a book. Help Africans learn.
Some anti-American rebellions seized 52 Americans in the embassy in Tehran and held them hostage for over a year. Here we are with one of the hostages that managed to escape, John Smith. What was it like being held hostage for 444 days?
Well, we were first held in the embassy, but after a failed rescue mission by the Americans, we were scattered throughout Iran, so they couldn't find us. Later on, we were also held in prisons, so we couldn't escape.
How did they treat you during all of this?
We lived our life in fear, and we were afraid of being abused and harmed. No one was treated with respect.
How did you feel after you and the other hostages managed to escape out of Iran?
When the pilot of the plane we escaped on told us we were finally out of Iran, the entire plane was clapping, cheering, and some were crying. Everyone was just so relieved and happy.
I'm glad to know that you and the others made it home safely. Back to you, Coke. Now for our next interview with Nelson Mandela himself. Next up in today's news broadcast, we're going to be interviewing the famous Nelson Mandela himself. So, you've had quite an interesting journey into becoming South Africa's president. Why don't you tell us something about it?
It all started happening 50 years ago when I was in prison for my activities with the African National Congress. I spent 26 years in maximum security prisons in South Africa, but even though those conditions were harsh, I never wavered from my resolve to secure the freedom of my country.
Wow, you must have had a strong sense of righteousness to keep yourself going for all those years. Now, how did you get back your freedom?
3 years before my departure from prison, I was offered freedom. But the catch was there were conditions to this freedom. I was offered, and so I denied them, saying only free men can negotiate. Prisoners cannot enter into contracts. Your freedom and mine cannot be separated.
So since you denied your only way to gain freedom, how did you gain your freedom?
A Nobel Peace Prize winner, Desmond Tutu, and several others worked to free me from prison. And eventually the worldwide pressure got to the South African government, and I was released from prison. And 3 years later, I became the president of South Africa.
This is definitely a unique interview, and a very interesting part of life history. Thank you for your time, Mandela.
Very welcome.
For the last news segment of today, we're going to have Pepsi have a discussion with the doctor about AIDS disease in Africa. I'm here with the physiologist herself, Dr. Pepper, and she's going to be telling us about the diseases that are starting to spread through Africa. Tell us the main thing that we should be worried about for these people in Africa.
Well, so far, AIDS is what's spreading through Africa the most, which is an HIV virus, who those of you who don't know. And AIDS spreads through body fluids.
So the stuff you just mentioned are the basic stuff. A particular question comes to mind when I think about this topic. How many people have this disease?
Well, AIDS is a worldwide epidemic. So over 33 million people are living with HIV all around the world. But Africa is hit the hardest, with 22.5 million victims of AIDS living in Africa.
This is concerning for a lot of people, including me, especially those with kids. What if I read this before this discussion was true? Then this disease can also affect kids psychologically.
Unfortunately, yes, it has a serious impact on them. Many children have lost their parents to AIDS, which left them homeless or orphaned and unable to go to school. So that means that these children will not learn or be educated how to protect themselves from this disease. And the same thing will happen to them when they get older.
Now for the question that most of our viewers are eager to hear. Do you think this disease will ever be stopped?
Yes, I do think this disease will be stopped. People are starting to think the right way. Some leaders are even spreading awareness about how to prevent this disease from spreading everywhere.
I'm glad people are becoming more aware of this disease as time goes on. Back to Cola to wrap up this news broadcast. That wraps up today at Soda Pop News. Make sure to visit sodapopnews.com for more information about today's topics. Have a good rest of the day. See you all later.